Welcome to this explainer. Today we are diving into something absolutely massive, tracing over 10,000 years of Japanese history. We're going to explore how this island nation, which is essentially a rugged archipelago of mountains, forests, and seas, constantly took in all these external influences and brilliantly synthesized them with its own deep native traditions. It's how they built a uniquely resilient civilization. Honestly, it's an incredible story of adaptation, and I am so excited to jump into this with you.
To make sense of this huge timeline, we're going to break it down into 5 key chapters: Roots of the Archipelago, the Imperial Golden Age, Rise of the Samurai, Chaos and Unification, and finally, the Long Edo Peace. This is going to be our roadmap from the very first hunter-gatherers right up to the threshold of the modern era.
Chapter 1: Roots of the Archipelago. From foragers to the first state. Our story kicks off in the ancient forests and coasts, long before we see any emperors or samurai.
Now just look at the sheer scale of the Jomon era. We're talking about over 10 millennia where these hunter-gatherers maintained an incredibly stable and creative culture, totally famous for their distinct cord-marked pottery. But then, around 300 BCE, they make contact with the Asian mainland, and this sparks a rapid, massive synthesis. The Yayoi culture kicks in, bringing wet rice farming and metallurgy. And as you might guess, competition over those new agricultural surpluses quickly led to the rise of powerful chieftains, which eventually paved the way for the Yamato state, Japan's very first centralized political power.
As that Yamato state was busy consolidating its power, they encountered a profound new influence from the continent: Buddhism. It was introduced in the 6th century and championed by leaders like Prince Shotoku. But he didn't just use it as a personal faith, he used it as a brilliant tool for statecraft and diplomacy. And here is the truly fascinating part. When Buddhism arrived, Japan didn't just wipe out its native Shinto spirits, the kami. No, they masterfully blended them together into this dual system. Shrines and temples literally stood side by side, which perfectly legitimized this brand new emerging Yamato imperial state.
Moving right along to Chapter 2, the Imperial Golden Age, featuring the Nara and Heian aristocracy. Let's see how this political centralization created Japan's first permanent Chinese-modeled capitals. By the 8th century, Japan set up permanent capitals, first at Nara and then later at Kyoto, which was known back then as Heian-kyo. This ushered in the Heian period, an era famous for having an intensely refined aristocratic court. Seriously, the elites in Heian-era Kyoto were completely obsessed with rank, poetry, and this concept called mono no aware. It's a profound sensitivity to mujo, the Buddhist concept of impermanence. It's this deep awareness that all beautiful things are fleeting. This whole vibe was brilliantly captured by a lady-in-waiting named Murasaki Shikibu in what a lot of people consider the world's very first novel, The Tale of Genji.
Status in this capital was absolutely everything, right? Your mastery of poetry and calligraphy literally determined your political favor. But that really begs the question, how does a land ruled by refined poets suddenly fall to men with swords? Well, it's pretty simple. While the capital's elites were busy composing poetry and isolating themselves in all this aesthetic refinement, they were completely losing their grip on the provinces. They had to rely more and more on provincial estate guards to collect taxes and keep the peace. And out there in the countryside, those guards were quietly, steadily amassing their own real martial power.
Which brings us to Chapter 3, Rise of the Samurai. Warriors take control. The balance of power shifts away from the delicate courts of Kyoto, straight into the harsh, gritty realities of the provinces. By the late 12th century, all that underlying tension exploded into the Genpei War. This was a brutal, nationwide civil war between two wildly powerful warrior clans, the Taira and the Minamoto. The once mighty Taira clan fell in absolute total defeat, proving that the poetic obsession with impermanence wasn't just a metaphor, it was a harsh reality. The famous tale of the Heike captures this perfectly, warning that the proud do not endure, fading like a dream on a spring night. This epic struggle forever shattered the aristocratic monopoly on power, plunging Japan right into its first true era of military feudal rule from a new eastern base called Kamakura.
Now, notice the stark contrast here. This new ruling class, the samurai, they had absolutely zero use for the delicate court poetry of the Heian period. Their world demanded intense clan loyalty and martial skill. So unsurprisingly, they fully embraced the newly imported austere practices of Zen Buddhism. Zen's focus on intense personal discipline, deep meditation, and directly facing the reality of death, that perfectly suited the incredibly harsh, pragmatic new reality these samurai lived in every single day.
And it's a good thing they were disciplined, because this warrior government was about to face the ultimate test, the vast Mongol Empire. In the late 13th century, Kublai Khan launched two absolutely massive invasion fleets against Japan. Now, the samurai fiercely defended the beaches of Kyushu, for sure, but ultimately, it was massive typhoons that destroyed the invading fleets. The Japanese called these storms the kamikaze, or divine winds, and that incredible stroke of luck embedded the idea of divine protection deep into the national consciousness for centuries.
But listen, victories like that can be incredibly costly. The financial strain of keeping all those warriors mobilized to fight the Mongols eventually triggered the collapse of the old Kamakura system. This throws us into Chapter 4, Chaos and Unification, the Sengoku period.
The collapse plunged Japan into what's known as the Warring States era. We're talking over a century of highly fragmented, absolutely ruthless warlord chaos. Regional lords, called daimyo, fought endlessly just to survive. But this total chaos was finally conquered by the three great unifiers. These were three very distinct, very powerful personalities who worked sequentially to stitch the shattered nation back together.
Let's look at the first unifier, Oda Nobunaga. He was a brilliant and utterly ruthless innovator. In 1560, facing an army that vastly outnumbered his own, Nobunaga actually used a literal thunderstorm to launch a massive surprise attack, completely crushing his rivals. He was also one of the very first commanders to grasp the sheer potential of the newly introduced Portuguese firearms. He used these early guns to shatter traditional cavalry charges, and basically kickstarted the brutal process of unification. When Nobunaga was betrayed and killed, his incredibly capable general, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, stepped right up. But Hideyoshi pacified the realm with more than just swords. He instituted massive institutional changes. He legally separated the samurai from the farmers with his famous sword hunt, basically ensuring that peasants couldn't rise up. He standardized land taxes based on rice yields. Essentially, he froze the entire social order in place. Why? To prevent the exact kind of upward mobility that had allowed him, a former peasant foot soldier, to rise all the way to the top.
So, Hideyoshi unifies the map, but then he dies, leaving only a child heir, and boom, massive power struggle. This culminates in the massive Battle of Sekigahara in 1600. Tokugawa Ieyasu, a wildly patient and calculating strategist, wins this decisive battle. But winning the war was only half the problem. Now he faced a huge dilemma for his new shogunate. How do you actually control a nation of warriors in peacetime?
This leads us right into Chapter 5, the Long Edo Peace, 2.5 centuries of stability. Let's look at how Tokugawa engineered an era of unprecedented calm.
The Tokugawa leaders set up this seriously ingenious system of control. They forced rival lords to split their time and, crucially, their wealth between their home domains and the capital of Edo. This was a policy called alternate attendance, and it effectively bankrupted any chance of rebellion because all their money went into traveling. Then they looked outward. It's so important to realize that the resulting sakoku, or closed country policy, wasn't born out of ignorance, not at all. Banning Christianity and heavily restricting trade was a highly calculated political move. It eliminated foreign political threats, allowing a uniquely Japanese urban culture to flourish totally independently.
And oh man, did it ever flourish. During this long peace, the economy absolutely boomed. Despite being placed at the absolute bottom of the official social ladder, merchants actually amassed immense wealth. And they used that money to fund a vibrant floating world of kabuki theater, puppet shows, and incredible art. They found joy in that same ancient concept of impermanence we talked about earlier, enjoying the fleeting pleasures of the moment. And they captured all of this brilliantly in mass-produced woodblock prints known as ukiyo-e.
But even behind closed doors, Japan remained incredibly curious. Right here, we see Japan's unbelievable talent for synthesis pop up again. While officially closed off to the world, a select group of scholars were quietly absorbing European science, medicine, and astronomy from a handful of Dutch traders who were strictly confined to a tiny island in Nagasaki. This was called Rengaku, or Dutch learning, and it ensured Japan wasn't completely insulated from global innovation.
For over 2.5 centuries, the Tokugawa preserved a peace that allowed their society to mature and stabilize. But, inevitably, foreign pressure finally cracked the Long Edo Peace.
When Western steamships arrived at their shores in the mid-19th century, Japan faced a massive existential crisis. Yet, as we've seen time and time again today, Japan's millennial-old instinct to absorb and adapt external influences left them perfectly primed to become a modern powerhouse. Looking at this amazing history of adaptation, it really